Hello world, it's the morning after the night before here in Hastings Land and it's raining. That's nice for a change. So I can't go out to play, so I thought I'd make a video for you instead. It is the morning after the night before, so you will have to excuse me if I have the odd slurp of coffee. I will try not to make it into an ASMR style slurp. The title of this video is probably quite confusing to you and you're probably wondering what on earth it's all about, but there are a number of reasons why I'm making this video. The title, I haven't even thought of it yet, but it'll probably be something about defeating Apple Music. What I say about Apple Music also will relate to other streaming services like Spotify. Brief history of the downloading music scenario. Started off with this website called Napster, which was a bit notorious because people could just go and download music and everyone thought, oh, it's all illegal and they're getting it for free and everything. Napster cleaned up their act and made a proper paid for music download thing, because I don't believe you shouldn't pay for music. You know, people make it, it is their living, and therefore they should get paid for it. And fair enough, you know, if you went and painted and decorated my flat, you would expect me to pay you. So do you know what I mean? It's exactly the same thing. So I do believe it should be legal. And the files that services like Napster and also things like MSN Music and iTunes as well were what we call DRM protected. That stands for Digital Rights Management Protected. No one liked it. What it essentially meant was that there was kind of coding within the file that you downloaded to check that you didn't make more than 5 copies of it to a CD, and that you didn't have it on other devices and all that sort of thing. Apple, bless their hearts, kind of got in on the act really, and they made sure that their files that they let you download were DRM free. Okay, it took a few years, took probably a fair bit of negotiation with the record company, but not only was it DRM free, but it was also double the quality of the 128 kilobytes per second files that they were originally letting you download. And they also upgraded all your files to 256 kbps files for free. That was all very well and good, and for a long time, for many years, in fact many years, it was great because we could treat a proper downloaded file like an ordinary MP3. You could send it to anyone else with an Apple device and they could play it, and it was good. Now, and I blame Spotify for this because I think they were the first major ones to do this, although Napster I think let you do it as well. Yeah, you could either get a service with Napster where you bought the individual files and you owned them, or that you could have this kind of monthly fee whereby you could stream anything. Only Napster, I think, were not as popular once they went legal. You know, suddenly up pops Spotify, which also offers you a package that for so and so a month, or free if you want the ads, then you can stream your music and you can just hear it. And then along came Apple Music, obviously, which is where I kind of jumped onto this bandwagon as well. You know, I still buy files from Apple Music if I like them enough, but I also, when I say Apple Music, I mean the iTunes store. Okay, there, I buy them from the iTunes store sometimes if I like them. Mainly though, if I like a song enough, I'll get a vinyl or a CD of it. Preferably a vinyl, obviously, because it's me. Now, the actual iTunes app, and the same with Spotify, they will not let you compile music onto a CD. I have a friend called Ben from YouTube. I think I've linked to him on my channel page, so go and check him out. He needs to give a CD to somebody, and he hasn't got a modern computer system. I think he's at home making brilliant YouTube videos, it has to be said. He's got a fantastic channel. In fact, I'll put the link down there. In fact, he really does have an amazing channel, and he needs more subscribers. Go down there and subscribe. He has an iPad for making videos on, I think. And I think he has an ancient PC with Windows XP on. He uses Spotify, and he said, I'm making this CD, compilation CD, across multiple CDs to give to somebody special. And he said, well, I can't do it. What's going on? Kind of thing. So I said, no problems, I'll do it for you. And as we had this conversation, first of all, I thought, well, Spotify use these files called ogg vorbis files, which are a bit obscure, but I think that an older PC might not recognise those, or you might have to somehow or other, you know, configure Windows Media Player, as it were, to accept ogg vorbis files. Just go into the preferences and tick ogg vorbis somewhere in the file formats list. But that didn't work, and I said I would try it. So I got a copy of his playlist and chucked it into Apple Music, okay, because I don't have to pay for any of these things. And then I tried to burn the CD, and I got an error message saying there are warnings, you cannot download this because it's an Apple Music file. You're paying a license now to actually stream it. You cannot physically own those products. You're only paying a tenner a month, folks. But what that means is that this lovely trippy kind of thing that we were on, whereby we could pay 79p or 99p for a song, download it and say, oh, that's a great song, pass it on to your mates, which it seems that everyone was happy with because they took the DRM protection out, so that you were free to do what you wanted with the files once you got them. You know, it's only good at the end of the day for music, and it's only good for bands to be able to pass things on to your mates. And as I say, and as I've always said, and forgive me if I repeat myself here, if you download your files and copy them onto a CD, you will get far better quality from a hi-fi CD player, even if you're using the DAC of the same CD player but playing them from within iTunes. iTunes is pretty poor quality. I know this because I know the instant difference that you get from playing a file within Logic and then plopping it onto iTunes. Because I use Logic, it's a professional music recording software, and I use it for a lot of my own songs and that sort of thing. I know that. So why can't we do it? Because, you know, you're not paying for it. The problem, the big problem as well, is that if you take your CD that you have bought from HMV, for example, and rip that into iTunes, and you still can, because they still do a separate CD drive, DVD drive thing, the Apple Super Drive thing. I've got one. If you rip that into iTunes, what it will do is go on to its database and happily replace that file that you have ripped into iTunes with one of its own that you still can't copy from CD. So this is the problem. This is the problem that we have, okay, with poor Ben, who wants to give a CD of his favourite songs to his friend to go away to university with. And so this is the one that I set out to solve. And I'm pretty happy because, you know, again, you're paying a tenner a month for these streaming services, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. The quality is a bit like listening to grass grow or wallpaper. People will tell you that in blind listening tests, you cannot tell the difference between, you know, one type of digital recorded file compressed, codec, whatever, than another. But actually you can. Spotify, I think, use a better sounding file. It's certainly a higher bit rate. They use the Ogg Vorbis at 320 kbps, I think. Whereas Apple use AAC files at 256 kbps. So it's not quite as good. You know, it's not amazing. And actually, for all the criticism of sound quality that MP3 got, they tend to sound much better than these streaming formats. Okay. In fact, actually, I would say that a file that you purchase from iTunes or Spotify or wherever you buy it from will sound better than a streaming file. Streaming sounds like wallpaper. It really does. Okay. Or grass growing. Okay. You can tell the difference, because what will happen is that after a time you will start to zone out of the music playing, whereas putting a record on or a CD on will keep your interest going. Okay, provided again that you use, you know, a reasonable standard of, you know, CD player. You know, I'm not talking necessarily about a Saturn R. Saturn R is amazing. It's a really good CD player, and it actually puts a smile on my face. But you know, a 200 quid Denon CD player, you know, will make a better job of playing downloads and streaming what's this than thingy. The thing that I'm going to suggest you do is something called analog tape compression. Voila, the humble cassette. Okay, back in the day, in order to get a record to sound pumping without the stylus jumping out of the groove, what engineers quite often did is something called analog tape compression. Now they would use very, very high quality reel-to-reel spools, you know, of 1 or 2 inch wide tape, and what they would do is mix it down onto another tape, but because tape has very high tolerances in terms of the amount of signal you can put on it, you can actually overload the meters a tiny bit, just to give the music a little bit of a sharper, more kind of lively and, you know, get up and go-y kind of edge. So once they've done that, then you have got a slightly edgier piece of music with the meters overloaded. And if you make a copy of that but don't overload the meters, you're still hearing in your mind, you're being tricked into believing that that kind of overloaded thing is much more lively and whatever, but actually, because the second copy that you've made is not overloading in any way, you're safe to then cut that onto a disc. Okay, so it's a kind of just making a slightly distorted copy, and I use the word distorted in the nicest sense, and then making a second copy that is not overloaded, so that then that is fine to make a master from. Okay, analog tape compression. A hi-fi cassette deck will now cost you on eBay, and again you will have to use eBay, it will now cost you about 30 odd quid. Ignore anything that says copy your cassettes to a CD or computer via USB. Those things, they're cheap, nasty muck. Okay, I get adverts for them on Instagram all the time, and they are muck. You know, they are nasty. Go and look for a deck. You do your research, but let me tell you, Yamaha KX580 or the Yamaha KX580 SE preferably, or some of the later Sonys. I used to have a NAD machine. I've showed it on YouTube before. It wasn't quite so good. It wasn't quite so good. This Yamaha is much better. And you know, while we're talking about cassettes, any shop bought pre-recorded cassettes will sound shit if they work at all. Okay, so ignore those. Get yourself some blank tapes. you'll find that pound for pound, the blank tape will cost you more than the actual cassette deck. But I picked up mine for £30 or £35 last year, which, you know, is absolutely peanuts to put into a hi-fi system. I will try now and outline the steps that you have to do in order to make a decent sounding CD copy of a playlist from Apple Music. What I will say to you as well is that this takes ages. Okay, as I speak now, I have made one side of a cassette's worth of CD copies, but this is, you know, it's really worth doing. The other thing is that, again, you'll be able to use various different, you know, either bits of software. For example, I will use Logic, but you can use Audacity. It's free to do this. All right. So, you know, what I'm showing you, you might be able to find creative ways around. Right. With that, I will stop prattling for a little while and go ahead and make the rest of this video. So what follows now is a method of defeating Apple Music or Spotify so that you can stream a playlist from one of those services and then compile that playlist to a CD. And not only will you be able to compile it to a CD so that you can get better quality playing it on a CD player, but it will actually sound better than the Spotify or Apple Music files. So step one is to go to your streaming service. Here is Apple Music, and download a playlist. This is Ben's playlist. As you can see, there are 49 songs there. Don't know why that says 48. I've got 49 songs, and it's 3 hours worth of music. So that's a big job for me, but that's the easiest bit, okay? And the most creative and fun bit. Put the songs in a nice order so that you actually are going to like listening to this, because you're going to hear this playlist loads of times before you've finished. Step two is to just look at your hi-fi system and check the connections. Now, I've got a computer, a CD player, an amplifier, and a hi-fi cassette deck here. So you're going to take a digital out from your PC or Mac, and you're going to connect that to the digital input on your CD player. This is how I do it, all right? There are other ways. I'll show you a couple of other ways in a moment. You take the RCA play lead out from your CD player, and you're going to plug that into an RCA input on your amp. You're going to have one lead coming out of your cassette deck, and it's going to go to an input on your amp. You're going to have the record out on your amplifier being plugged into an input on your cassette deck. That's pretty standard tape loop things from the past. It's how we've always done it with anything that can record. All right, and obviously your amplifier will also be connected to a pair of speakers. A couple of alternative ways here. If you've only got a headphone jack on your computer and haven't got a digital out, then you can plug that. You take a single headphone socket, as it were, an ordinary 3.5mm headphone socket, out to a lead that has got two RCA plugs on the other end, and plug that into an input on your amplifier that's spare. It's not particularly brilliant because there you're hearing your computer all the time and you're not hearing your hi-fi system reproduce the music. Okay, some amplifiers, some of the better, more expensive amplifiers, have a digital input there. So if your CD player doesn't have a digital input, you can plug it into a digital input on your amplifier instead, and you can take out the output from your the digital output from your computer and plug that into an amplifier. And it's worth pointing out, regardless of method, whether it's this method or this method, that iMacs double up their headphone socket and use that as an optical digital output to plug to an amplifier or a CD player. Okay, in the alternative method for step two, the cassette and the amplifier and speakers are the same. Okay, and also the CD player going out is just as it normally is. just being plugged into an amplifier. Choose a blank cassette. Now, you get 3 types of blank cassette: type 1, type 2 and type 4. There used to be a type 3, but there isn't anymore. They were rubbish, all right? Type 1, I'm not going to recommend for this. I'm going to say that preferably you need a chrome tape. The reason why is because some cassette decks are not able to actually record onto a metal tape. They will play back a metal tape, but they're not able to record onto it. The machine that I recommend, the Yamaha KX580, will actually record onto metal, but check your machine, okay? Especially if you're going to buy one for this kind of job, okay? I've recommended some good brands here, and I've also said that 60 and 90 minute tapes are best. The 120 minute tapes use a lot thinner cassette, a lot thinner tape, which is liable to break. So don't use 120. All right. Now you're going to set up your level meters, and in order to do that, you're going to press record without pressing play. Pop a tape inside the one that you're going to record onto, and just press record without pressing play, and then play some of the music from your playlist, and make sure that you have got the first set of red lights. Here are the green lights, those are the red lights. Obviously you've got those lit up most of the time. This is for pop music. For classical music it's slightly different, but for pop music you want these red lights lit up most of the time. Occasionally you want a red light, this is why I've just done it in a pinky colour, you want a red light to go 2 bars over, okay, but no more than that, okay? That's as much as you need to overload that tape, all right? A couple of red warnings here. Clean your tape heads before you do anything. So get a head cleaning cassette for that, or some fluid and some cotton buds. Turn off any email notifications, text message notifications, anything that's going to make a bleep or a ding dong on your computer, because that will come out on the tape as you're recording. So turn that lot off, okay? And at the risk of patronising you, which I really don't mean to do, a tape is ready to record when the full spool of tape is over on the left. You can just about make that out on my tape here that I'm holding, okay? And also that there are a few seconds of clear tape, which is a blank space at the beginning of the tape, so let that go through before you start playing any music that's going to be recorded. Otherwise you'll chop off the beginning of a song, and that is very, very easy to do, okay? So I apologise for patronising you, but once you've sorted that out, then you're ready to make your recording onto a cassette. Once you have actually recorded onto your cassette, you will then need to switch off your tape deck and switch off your amplifier, because you're going to make a few changes to the connections, okay? In fact, actually, you're going to make one change, all right? We have still got our record out from the amplifier plugged into the cassette deck, but it's doing nothing here, so that's why I've whited it out, because you can leave that there, all right? But you need to take the lead that was plugged into an input on the amplifier, unplug it from the input of the amplifier, and take it instead from the cassette into a USB device onto an input, all right? You'll find that there are the same RCA connections on there, all right? So you're going to have the cassette output, as it were, going into the USB device, okay? That was originally plugged into the input on your amplifier. Just unplug those 2 little sockets there and plug them into this input on the USB device. Take the USB device into your computer, all right? Again, if you've not got one of these USB devices, look up the one that I've mentioned there, the Behringer U-Control UCA202. They're a few quid, get one. Alright, you can, again, it will be at the detriment of the sound quality, but you can just take a lead that has got an RCA input on one end, that goes into the output of the cassette, and then it's got a 3.5mm input jack that will go to a line input on your computer. Macs don't have a line input anymore, but PCs do. Alright, so if you've got a Mac, you have to use one of these USB devices. Okay, so it really is just altering one lead, right? And I've made it sound more complicated to say than it is to do. Okay, a simple pimple. You want to set up Logic or Audacity, watch this video. I apologise for the sound quality on this bit, by the way. So now I'm choosing a new file in Logic, but you can use Audacity if you like, just to get the computer ready to record from the cassette onto the computer. So this is the audio set up here, and it's already chosen by default in Logic. So create that. You get a new track here. You can make that bigger or smaller on here, like this, if you like. And then you go into Logic Pro X, you choose Preferences and Audio. Now my output device here is the built-in output. Now that is just to go to a pair of headphones, which is probably quite safe to do. The input device here is the USB audio codec, which is coming from your USB device, and then you just choose Apply Changes. Well, I don't need to apply the changes because that's how they're already set, and then you're ready to go. Don't forget about that blank bit in front of the cassette, and then all you do is start your cassette playing, let those few seconds go, and then click record on here. If you get a little bit of a blank bit in front, it doesn't matter because you can cut it out, and I'll show you how all that works in a moment. Right, so what's happening, man? Just a couple of cassette specs so that you're aware. With Dolby B noise reduction on, which is all you need. I don't like Dolby C. It ends up with recording sounding a little bit too muffled. Dolby S is good, but not all tape decks have Dolby S. So Dolby B is fine. You will get a signal to noise ratio of 68 decibels. The signal to noise ratio is basically the lowest, quietest sound that a piece of hi-fi can reproduce without it being drowned in hiss. And the difference between that and the loudest sound that it can reproduce without it going into distortion. We are going into a little bit of distortion, as I say. We're going 1, maybe 2 bars into the red, which will do no harm whatsoever. It'll give you a slightly wider signal to noise ratio than 68 decibels, but on my KX580 cassette deck, that's the kind of signal to noise ratio you're going to get. Now on a CD player, especially modern ones, I think the original CD player signal to noise ratio was something like 96 decibels, something like that, and now you're getting signal to noise ratios of 100, maybe more decibels. So you can see that actually any volume coming out of your cassette deck is going to be a lot less than a CD player can reproduce. So one of the things that we'll have to do once we've got our recording off our cassette and into the computer is to make sure that that volume is as loud as a CD player can reproduce it. Otherwise it just won't sound satisfying. Now when you're using chrome tape, the frequency response that you'll get is 20 Hertz. That's a very, very, very low bass note. All right, up to 18,000 Hertz, which is a very, very high treble note. Okay, with metal tape, that again, not all cassette decks can record onto metal tape. All right, but with metal tape, you can get a full 20 Hertz to 20,000 Hertz low to high frequency response there. All right. You may well think that that's a disadvantage, but if you use chrome tape, as I say, you won't notice that the treble is disappeared as long as you've got your tape heads cleaned, like I said earlier. As long as you clean your tape heads before you make that recording onto cassette, you're fine, okay? And what will happen is that that nasty, harsh edge, which it characterises a lot of downloads and even recording some CD, will disappear. And it will just sound nice and warm and deep and textured and fluffy, okay? So here you can see a good illustration of the difference between the signal to noise ratio of a cassette versus that of a CD. This, from top to bottom here, is the full amount of noise or music signal that a CD can actually handle. A cassette is only putting out a tiny wee bit of that volume, okay? And so what we need to do now is go through, we need to edit this. I'm going to put my headphones on. We have headphones on, and we're going to make this output from the cassette match that of a CD. So first of all, we have no signal whatsoever here. Now, I'm not going to let you hear this music because I'll get done for copyright, okay? But here, this fine line here is where there is no sound at all. So that'll be the remnants of the little blank bit at the beginning of the tape. And here, this is where the music starts, okay? It's actually Fleetwood Mac. And the song that it is called Say You Love Me. So I'm going to play along here. And at the moment, I've just got hiss. Until there, where these little bumps start, and these little bumps represent music, okay? So I'm going to press Command and T in Logic, although it will be different for Audacity. And I've made a split in that tape, in the, well, I'm saying tape, but it's the computer equivalent of, and I'm just going to cut that away. So now I don't have that bit of silence there. All right, I'm going to choose here the fade tool, and I'm just going to do a minute amount of fade, and I'm going to do that at the beginning of every song, okay, so that you don't hear any of the tape hiss that is inherent in cassette recording. Got some drums starting now. Okay, so then I'm going to move along and just keep moving until I can see another one of those blank spaces. Just about here. That's the end of the first song. I'm listening to it fade out now. Right, it's finished fading out now. So here, again, I'm going to press Command and T again to split it. And I'm going to now split this so that there's a gap between song number 1 and song number 2. It's very tiny, actually. I'll go back. That'll do. And so there, I can just click on that little gap there that I've done, press delete, and that's now gone. Okay, and then if I take the first song, the Fleetwood Mac song, and then I'm going to double click on the track. Might have to go back to my pointer tool here. Double click on that. I can leave that there now. Go back to the fade tool. Okay, because I will need to, again, I'm going to get a bit where it's going to dissolve into tape hiss. That's the lowest point of the dynamic range of the tape. And I'm just going to fade that just a little bit so that we don't hear the tape hiss. Okay. Now that I've done that, if I click File here and click Functions and Normalize, you'll watch that volume. See how that has now gone right back up to the volume that a CD can actually handle. And you need to do that for all of the songs on the tape. So I'm going to stop this recording here, and then I'm going to come back and show you when that's all been done. Right, we are finally, well, I say finally, but we're nearly at the end of the stages that you need to go through to get the tape copy equalized in volume and then copied to a disc. I'm afraid that really the only way to do this so that you've got all of the songs with the titles and the albums that they've come from is to go back through iTunes, which can be a bit of a nightmare, but we'll do the best we can, and it is possible to do it because I've done it. Okay, so this is disc 2. I've done disc 1 already, and yeah, that's done. So I know that this is possible, but you do need to fiddle faffle a little bit to make sure that it doesn't try and swap your beautiful MP3 copies of what's come from here into an Apple Music file, and then if it changes it to an Apple Music file, you're screwed. Now that we've got all these songs split up, we have to take them one at a time into iTunes. So the way we do that is we make sure that this white bar here means this part of the track is selected. Alright, so this part here has not got a white bar, so track number 1 is selected at the moment. And what we're going to do is we're going to press Command and B in Logic to bounce it to an MP3 file. Okay, now I've chosen the best configuration of MP3 you can have, which is 320 kilobytes per second. You could choose Apple Lossless. You could even burn to a CD or DVD straight from within Logic, which would save all the hassle in iTunes. The only disadvantage of that is that you then don't get a playlist in iTunes that you can play of your wonderful cassette files, which actually will sound better, even though they shouldn't, because of the limited dynamic range and because of the slightly curtailed frequency response, but they do sound one hell of a lot better than the streaming files that you'll get from Apple Music. So I'm putting them to MP3, the reason being that MP3 is a universal file, so my friend Ben will be able to then play them himself and not have any sort of worries about compatibility, and also because it means that when you get into iTunes, when you try and find out which file it is that it's playing, and you'll see what I mean in a moment or two, you'll just be able to straight look at MP3, and yeah, you won't get confused with any of the Apple files that might well be on your disc. So go to write ID 3 tags on here. Okay, see, I've just ticked MP3 in this box here. I've chosen the right bit rate here, which is the highest you can have. use variable bitrate encoding. We've got all of this ticked, use best encoding, filter frequencies below 10 Hertz. No one hears anything below 10 Hertz, believe you me. Alright, and then stereo mode is normal. We've got the right ID3 tags ticked, and we're going to do the ID3 settings now. Alright, so the song title is not called Bend 2, it's called Say You Love Me. So we'll pop that on there. Alright, and the artist is Fleetwood Mac. And then the album that it comes from is Greatest Hits. So we'll do that. We'll type it properly. This way, Apple will be able to find the artwork for it. Alright, and we say OK to that. Now the reason we're putting the album settings here, you can do it from within iTunes, but I have found over the years that when I've done that and then had to re-import my music library and that sort of thing, for example when I've changed computers, is that iTunes will forget what you've told it, whereas in Logic, if you encode it now, then it will remember. Alright, so we'll do that. We'll say OK to that. Right, we have to put the song title in again because this is where we're going to save it. Okay, now my friend Ben is making this for his boyfriend, and so the folder that he's putting it in is one called Bavid, which is just a nickname for the two of their relationship. If we bounce that now, what will happen is we will get a copy of that in here and a copy in iTunes. So this is a different folder that's going onto my desktop, and I'll chuck this onto Dropbox so that he's got it. So click bounce, and as you can see, it's only going to encode the little bit that we selected, i.e. that first song. Alright, so when we go into iTunes, alright, that's the first disc I've done. Alright, I'm going to make a new playlist. File, new playlist. And then this is going to be called Bavid 2. Okay. We have no items in here at the moment, but if I take this Bavid disc and find Say You Love Me, I can drag that into the playlist. You can see that Apple has now gone on and found the artwork. Now, in these playlists, if I show you Bavid 1, you can see that it puts little hearts next to the song. Do not click those hearts. If you click those hearts, it will go on and find the match in Apple Music and try and replace your file, which is a pain in the neck. You absolutely don't want that. So here, if I right click or two finger tap on my magic trackpad here and choose song info and choose file, you can see it's still an MPEG audio file that's been encoded with Logic. Alright, if you're using Audacity, it will say it's encoded with Audacity. Alright, you need it to say that, otherwise it won't copy it to a CD. Alright, so I've now got to go through back into Logic, grab the next song, put in the details, drag it into a playlist, and do that for all of the songs that are on this disc. Alright, and when I've done that, I'll come back to you. Okay. Alright, I'll see you soon. And this is exactly what I mean. I've done one other song and it has actually blooming well changed Say You Love Me. I haven't done anything at all to this. It's changed it to an Apple Music AAC audio file, which means that now it's going to say it can't actually it can't actually burn my disc. So we'll cancel that. 2-finger tap. Right, we're gonna remove the download. Alright, because otherwise it's not gonna know. We're going to remove it from playlist, remove the song, alright, and then take Say You Love Me again and put it back, alright. The other infuriating thing about iTunes is that if you have got Apple Music files, then you cannot change the order of the songs. If you're using MP3s, you can, alright. So that now says, oh, it's saying an Apple Music file again. Remove from playlist, remove the song, do it again. What? It won't let me drag it. It isn't MP3 and it won't let me drag it. I'm going to delete this playlist. Try it again. Alright, Say You Love Me, and then Other People. Alright, Say You Love Me says that it's an MPEG file. Other People says it's an MPEG audio file. Okay, now while you're making this playlist, you will find that they will change back, and you will have to try and just do it so that by the time you're ready to make the CD, they all say MPEG audio files. It's probably nothing to do with clicking that heart. It's just Apple going online and matching the songs. So yeah, I'm just annoyed about that. At the last count, I had all of these 11 songs all saying MP3 files. Okay, so if I do song info on Bohemian Rhapsody, it's an MPEG audio file, which is fine. Okay, it's a copy from my cassette. Oh God. I'm wiping my forehead as I do this, okay? So I have a CD prepped already in my USB CD drive. It's an Apple Super Drive. If I do File, Burn Playlist to Disk, alright? Okay, now on the preferred speed thing, it's never best to do maximum possible. I choose 8 times as a compromise between speed and accuracy of burning the disk. Okay, so if I click burn now, there shouldn't be any warnings. Preparing disk. Right, oh Lord, it's actually doing it. Okay, so I will stop this recording now because I have made a disk. Okay, it is initializing. Right, that's how to do it. You just, it's a headache, okay? And this is Apple's fault because of the way that they've implemented Apple Music means that you can't even rip songs into iTunes from a disc that you already have and then get the same quality that you would have from the disc. If I'd ripped a disc in an Apple AV file to get the best quality, it will then go on to an Apple Music and choose that crappy 256 kbps stream thing, which can't even make a copy of a disc. Okay, there are legal issues and fairness issues with making a copy of a disc, but I think that a few years ago when Apple decided that they were going to rip the songs of their DRM, digital rights management thing, to give you freedom to do what you want with the files. They should have kept to that, and this Apple Music thing actually hasn't done that. Okay, so I'm going to have to be very careful again about what vinyl uploads I put onto YouTube, because again, there is this issue of the fact that it might change my vinyl upload of the song into an Apple Music file, so I'll just have to be careful it doesn't. Alright, so I'm going to leave it there, and that is it. Bye bye. How do I stop this damn thing?